Hey, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jason Freed, Hospitality Data Evangelist at MDO. I would like to welcome you to the International Luxury Hotel Association's webinar on powering your hotel's profitability through effective optimization strategies. Today's webinar is brought to you by MDO, which centralizes and stores critical performance and financial data for hotel ownership, management groups, and asset managers. Through integrated data feeds, document workflow management, and data visualization dashboards, hoteliers can reach greater levels of profitability by operating more efficiently, improving budgeting and forecasting, and making more data-driven decisions. So I'm super excited to be joined today by some amazing panelists, and we're going to go around the room and hear a bit more about their companies and their roles. And I'll get started there with an introduction. Again, my name is Jason Freed. Former journalist. So what that means is I got really good at asking questions and learning about hospitality best practices. And that's what I do today at MDO as Hospitality Data Evangelist. I work with our customers and industry thought leaders to really uncover ways hoteliers are using data to make more informed decisions. With that, we'll go through the panelists. I'll start with Bridget. Bridget Tran is Chief Marketing Officer and Corporate VP of Revenue Planning at Club Quarter Hotels. Bridget, do you want to give us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. And thank you for having me on this panel today. So I've been with Club Quarters for a little over 2 years. And my background actually is in data, digital transformation, e-commerce. I've been brought onto Club Quarters to scale the business, to transform what used to be a corporate hotel to a more leisure hotel. So, and scaling it from a 3-star 16 hotel to a 4-5-star. And we're projecting to triple that amount in the next few years. So my role here really is to look at the business strategy, more from the digital and marketing perspective and how we can scale and enhance our business model.
That's awesome. Exciting news happening at Club Quarters.
Yeah, yes, lots.
Brian Goodman is with Real Hospitality Group. Brian, do you want to give a minute about your role?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jason, and thanks everyone for having me on the panel. I work at Real Hospitality Group. I've been there almost 6 years. My role is in our development and acquisitions department, essentially responsible for growing the business. Real Hospitality Group manages over 100 hotels, close to 15,000 rooms across the USA, and excited to be on the panel.
Thanks for being with us, Brian. Joseph Yee. Joe, you want to go next?
Hi, everybody. I also work with Brian. I'm the Chief Investment Officer of Real Hospitality Group. We brought two on this panel today because I am very exposed here, so I decided to bring in my right-hand man to cover what I can't cover. So I'm excited to be on the panel. Hopefully we could add some creative stories and some value to the conversation, and looking forward to it.
Thanks for being with us, Joe. And last but not least, we have Angie Hughes with Bartell Hotels. Angie, tell us a little bit about Bartell and what you do there.
Yes, my name is Angie Hughes, and I'm with Bartell Hotels. We own and operate 8 hotels in around the beautiful city of San Diego. My role at the company, my umbrella is over both digital marketing and revenue management. So we're really combining those two disciplines in order to really understand the business and how to market appropriately to all of our guest segments.
Fantastic. I've got a few talking points. I've got a couple minutes to sort of set up the conversation here and set the framework for what we're talking about, which is total profit optimization. What is total profit optimization? It's, obviously we're not the first people to talk about measuring the profit at your business. All businesses measure their profit and look at ways they can optimize that. But I think today we have a lot more data as hoteliers at our fingertips to really look inside the business and take a deep dive into which areas of the business are performing. So total profit optimization is the act of sort of broadening your operational strategies to include a focus on all of the revenue generating areas in a hotel, including your ancillary outlets, and then measuring the flow through of each of those outlets to determine optimal profitability. The first part of that is sort of, if you look at the top line, this expansion from sort of RevPAR as a metric to TrevPAR as a metric, or total revenue per available room. And we've seen, along with a renewed interest in travel post-COVID, a renewed interest in all of these other ancillary revenue departments in our hotel. And in March of 2023, we set a record as an industry, according to STR, where RevPAR was slowly increasing and hit $103 in March of 2023. TrevPAR, or total RevPAR, hit $238 in March of 2023, which set a record. It was up 17.5% over March 2022. So that really shows you that that our guests are looking at our ancillary outlets as well as staying in our hotels, in our rooms. And then the second part of that, sort of the transition from top line to bottom line, you can see, as evidenced in some of the new metrics that the benchmarking companies in our industry are incorporating into their business. Things like hotel collected revenue rather than ADR, right? So what did what did the hotel actually bring in terms of revenue on each booking, minus the costs, the acquisition costs that you had to spend to get that booking. And then on the profitability metrics, we see companies like STR looking more closely at things like GOPAR, gross operating profit per available room, EBITDA per available room, and then taking a really more specific look at labor costs. And we'll get into that a little bit further about how labor costs are really affecting our bottom line and continue to rise. So I guess, sort of the overarching theme is while demand continues to be strong and top line revenue numbers continue to be strong, profitability is somewhat stable, but predicted to slip over the next 18 months. GOP percent of revenues expected to fall slightly, EBITDA expected to fall slightly, labor costs continue to rise. Forecasting data, according to STR's most recent forecasting data. So now we'll open the conversation up, and I wanted to start by asking you guys about those exact numbers, right? So obviously STR looks at everything on an average, looks at across the entire country, sometimes across the entire world. And we know that the hotel industry is more market specific, segment specific. So I wanted to ask you guys, what kind of trends are you seeing at your hotels in terms of demand and profitability, and a little bit about those ancillary outlets? Are you guys also seeing some pickup in those other revenue generating areas of the property? Let me start with maybe Joe or Brian from Real Hospitality. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, Jason, let me kind of, if you will, maybe a little bit more context to the national stats. As you were mentioning, real estate is generally market specific, and each separate market has a little bit different dynamicism. So yes, nationally, top line revenue has been good. And generally speaking, top line revenue has been driven by ADR growth more so than occupancy growth. Once again, as an operator and an owner, that also is a good stat to have to drive your bottom line. Now, if you're just looking at room revenue, that's a good stat to have. But if you're also talking about full service hotels, not having the occupancy impacts your TrevPAR, not so much your RevPAR, but your TrevPAR. But getting to my point, if you kind of segment or look at the market, the hotel sector kind of geographically, you'll find that the urban markets have been able to sustain better GOP growth than maybe the secondary, tertiary markets, primarily because the RevPAR growth is, if you want to say, consistent across the board. What I mean by that is most markets are up to pre-COVID levels. However, if you look at GOP, and the issues of the GOP are primarily labor-driven, labor cost-driven, if you will. The higher gateway markets, higher barrier markets, pre-COVID generally had relatively higher wage costs, at least in relation to kind of your, whatever you want to call it, living wage. Certainly not minimum wage, because the national minimum wage is obviously well below the local minimum wage. But if you look at New York City, for example, housekeeping wage was roughly about, and obviously labor and non-union and non-union makes a distinction. So I'll just go kind of more market driven at around $20. Post-COVID, it has gone up, but it's not as materially has gone up as high. Whereas you look at secondary markets, even including markets that we have assets, for example, in secondary areas of Nashville. We bought an asset in 2018 where the hourly rate was roughly about $10. Post-COVID, or now, post-COVID, we're at $14, $15.
Wow.
So you're talking about a 10% increase in some markets to 40, 50% increase in market. So, we look at GOP, and in these secondary markets, we've effectively underwritten saying, we will never get back to our GOP pre-COVID levels because this in-place labor cost is incredibly high in comparison to rate that we get on these assets. So I will look at it that way. And then just, briefly, I would also look at segments, or chain scale. Upper upscale products and luxury products already had a higher baked-in labor cost, but that also kind of comes back to urban and non-urban markets as well, because as you know, upper upscale tends to be more concentrated in urban markets or gateway markets. Certainly you got some resort properties, but gateway markets versus secondary. So that already kind of was talked about, but that's the way I will look at it from a kind of sanitizing the data, make it relevant.
That's great insight, Joe. Thanks for sharing that. I wonder if the other panelists are seeing similar, wage increases and that pressure, driving pressure to the bottom line.
Yeah, Jason, I can just piggyback a little bit on Joe. What we saw at the start of the pandemic and 2021, 2022 included, was record high contract labor, especially in your housekeeping department. So for example, in our Nashville hotels, they were pretty much 100% contract labor. Obviously, that did affect GOP, did affect flow through. We've seen the labor market to kind of ease out a little bit over the past couple of months. So our hotels at least are almost 90% reducing that contract labor reliance. So we're seeing recently a little bit higher GOP percentages. So really, it's kind of a linear relationship between contract labor and GOP. If you're able to minimize that contract labor, even with wage growth, you're still able to float a little bit of GOP these days.
That's a great takeaway, Brian. Thanks for sharing. Bridget, how about club quarters? What are the performance trends looking like at club quarters these days?
Yeah, just to finish the thought from Brian and Joe, in addition to labor costs, we've seen utilities and rent, all that has gone up as well. So, we're using so everything that used to be fixed cost, now all of a sudden it's gotten up. So it's not only affecting profitability on the labor side, but all the other fixed costs are affecting as well. And what I've seen what we've been doing, and I've seen other hotels do or practice, there's an increase in technology use, whether it's emerging technology or technologies we've known in a while, like, for example, kiosks, right? We've about 15, 20 years ago, there was a big boom about kiosks, and then it kind of died away. People don't use kiosks anymore because it's not cool, but it's coming back because it plays a functional role, which is when there's no one there, you can just go to the kiosk, get your key program. You don't need that person. You can check in, check out, and do as you please at the time you want. So I think that it's making its fashion, right? Making its way back as a trend, because when you used to have 3 or 5, depending on the size of your hotel, front desk people, and now you have 1 to 3. Well, who's going to service that long line? And you don't want that long line. So technology is becoming a big thing, and investing in technology. So not just guest experience technology, but operationally. So, we talk about kiosks, we talk about robots, a lot of, and this goes across the board from luxury to non-luxury. Having lobby robots as a greeter, having robots deliver room service, whether it's bathroom amenities or food. Having apps, everybody has apps now. So instead of just having an app to check in, check out, why not has an app, add apps as more of a guest service? Maybe your concierge staff is cut down from 5 to 2. Put the concierge in there, put the auxiliary bookings and services, customer service, all in the app. Using text messages, using chat bots. So instead of having someone constantly replying, have robots that can filter out a lot of the FAQs. And one thing that we have been doing here, and in my previous life in Nobu, we've implemented is it's Wi-Fi and Bluetooth marketing, leveraging the connectivity you already have with the guests via Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So really not only doing the push marketing, but also the communication, the personalization of the services, actually knowing where they are at the hotel or in the vicinity.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, Bridget. I think, COVID really evolved the way hotels are presenting or evolved the way, really the way travelers are interacting with their hotel, and technology is really stepping in there. I wonder, Angie, if you guys have seen similar, evolving guest experience at Bartel and sort of how you are reacting to that across all the different ancillary outlets at your properties.
I would say that definite technology. We use a lot of technology. Old time, you would call the guest, "How's your stay?" Now you send a message through technology. It's also a way to communicate, different times of the restaurant when there's specials that are going on, to try to expand when your guest comes. So you're not, you have an hour and everybody's busy, and then there's crickets the rest of the time. So really, and that goes back to really understanding the demand of the timing of the restaurants, by 15-minute increments, and how can you expand and get guests to go your off times. Technology's helped us a lot to do that. Funnily enough, we're a beta test for our Sheraton for robots to do our bathrooms. So they're programmed to do specific areas to clean up the bathroom.
Cool.
Because who wants to do that? And they do it perfectly. And beyond that, we didn't really go the kiosk method, but a lot of, through our brands, use the check-in with the phone. So, the app, they check in, they don't have to go to the front desk, they can pick their own room. But we're starting to see at some of the resorts that they want the customer, or they want the interaction with our hotel team. So we're really needing to balance that out. We have noticed, segmentation wise, that more families want more attention. Whereas that business traveler in and out, they don't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah, very interesting. Yep.
And I think that how we're helping with the data is really understanding our business mix for the future and what our pickup and demand is, so we can schedule appropriately for what our customer wants.
Yeah. So that's very interesting when you talk sort of about, as the guest approaches, you want to involve all the other departments, right? So you talked about having restaurant times or driving demand when the restaurant is otherwise slow. That requires sort of a total revenue management approach, right? Or requires a lot of coordination between different departments. I think you were telling us an interesting story about concerts. We typically think of F&B and golf and spa and parking as our ancillary outlets, but you guys have been doing some interesting things with live music.
Yeah, one of our properties has a concert venue that's right on the bay. It's beautiful. It's small-ish. It's about 1,500 seats, and we get a variety of acts that are come there. And what we learned through kind of so to put it in total revenue management, what we do is we project the timing, when they're coming, who they're coming, what they specifically want. We have the data on, ordering and what the guest wants, and whether they want fufu drinks or they want wine, or they're just, beer and whiskey type of guys. And it's an extremely quick turnaround, couple thousand people in, and we want that to be the best experience ever. And what we've noticed is that different guests have different expectations. And how do we take our historical data, here's what we believe that this guest wants. We order, we schedule, we get everything in. And then once, post concert, how did we do? Were we profitable? Did we run out of things? How are their tastes changing? So it's just like a microcosm of total revenue management. And we do it, 80 times, 80 different nights across. And, how do we know whether it's that specific act, or hey, it's a Tuesday, or it's a Saturday in the middle of summer? So we're really digging into the individual bits of data to make sure we're continually improving that profitability.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's some awesome. Thanks for sharing that story. It's, it's a way that we're using data to really personalize the guest experience. And, from my opinion, we've been talking about personalization for a long time, and it's been a slow sort of slog to get there. I wonder, Bridget and Joe and Brian, if you guys have any, similar stories where you're using data to personalize the guest experience.
I can start first. Absolutely. Data is queen, as I would say. if content's king, data is queen.
Yep.
I'll refer back to Nobu versus Club Quarter, because I was there for a while. So, we all know that Nobu's been around for a while, but 25 years and 47 restaurants. And prior to my coming to Nobu several years ago, there wasn't really a database. The database was in everyone's head. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever gone to a Nobu, you know that they are really good. They remember exactly what you like. They know your name. They know your whole history, your family, your favorite color, and everything. And that's data, but it's in someone's head. So if they leave, you don't have that data. So but in addition to our staff having all great memory, implementing a CRM, a data platform, is highly important. It's what the servers and the bartenders have been doing for years. Now you have it automated. Now all of a sudden you have machine learning, you have AI, and in addition to having those knowledge, now you can see data points. You can start making connections. And it has helped business, not just delivering personalization, but also anticipating the needs before they even know it. So now all of a sudden you're wowing them. You're like, oh my God, how did you know? I like that. Well, if you've always ordered banana split, so I figured you like, banana bread too, because you like bananas, stuff like that, and it goes more complex than that. And so, as marketers, as revenue management or IT or C-suite, we look at these data points not only to deliver the best service for our brand and our guests, but also to be able to optimize business. It helps us to reduce inefficiency, increase productivity. We've been able to not only calculate revenue per seat rather than just revenue per reservation or table. And now, even in housekeeping, we know what days we should have more housekeeper and what days we shouldn't, because it's this data. All this data not only is benefiting the guests, but it's also benefiting business as well. And it's helped us drive not only efficiency, but higher profitability.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that applies from the investment world perspective as well, to kind of give you a little bit of different perspective outside of the operator's perspective. Data obviously is critical. One of the things I used to always say why I'm in the hotel business versus the other asset class in real estate, notwithstanding the fact that I've been doing this for 15, 16 years, so I have nowhere to go, if you will, although I do cover other asset class, is that we have a lot more data to make execution or the decision process of where to invest, what brand to invest with, is more abundant than any other asset class. And more importantly, it's available on a day-to-day level. So from an investor's perspective, we have to look at kind of what brand does well, right? If I have to assess Bridget's team and club quarters, there's a lot of data on contribution, brand contribution. What are they delivering versus third parties? And how are they effectively managing customer satisfaction, brand loyalty, and everything else in between? And then even geographically, we'll go on to Google Trend analysis to figure out if there's population growth, but more importantly, is there inquiry growth, search growth in certain geographical markets? And if you're heavy into certain segments, whether it's on the upper tier and gateway markets, those stats are more relevant, but easier to dissect than some of the smaller markets that doesn't have that kind of search volume. And then, of course, if you're in New York or if you're in LA, then you know where your demand is coming from, Mexico, Canada, UK, if you will. And then you have to think about what is the brand and your operator doing in marketing to those markets. So data in our business is, as we say, king, and is how to manage that. But I will say one last thing, especially from an operator's perspective, as we know on our side of the fence, data is everywhere. It's literally, you could bump into data at every corner. Every email has data for some reason, and it's how you make that data relevant. So there's a lot of noise. How do you cut through the noise, make it focused, so you can make effective decisions that impacts the day. And the way I like to approach data is take an issue that you already have, microly focus on that particular data, correct that issue, put the SOP in process, and then, of course, tackle the next problem.
Yeah, great takeaways there, Joe. So I think, guys, we've sort of tackled and, came away with some good takeaways for top line revenue management, or expanding to a total revenue management philosophy on the operations side. What about sort of part B of this total profit optimization, which is, shifting our mindset from looking at top line revenue to measuring more of the bottom line performance? I wonder if you can just weigh in on, has that been sort of a strategy at your companies? Have you sort of shifted that mindset? And what, some of those important metrics for your companies are today? Can I start with you, Brian?
Yeah, sure. I can take that, Jason. I think to start, in terms of evaluating metrics, whether it be GOP or NOI or just KPIs, I think everyone involved who touches an asset, whether it be an asset manager, general manager, a regional director of ops, or even a front desk agent, I think needs to know their data. So, for example, bringing it to more of an operations and miscellaneous, department revenue, do your front desk agents know if they're capturing no-show revenue, cancellation fees? What is the incentive on that? We found that if we incentivize, our front desk personnel to capture these fees, we're going to have a greater collection of these fees. And obviously that leads straight down to flow through. So really having that, I would say, more of a holistic approach of everyone knowing the asset and key data points really translates well into success. So at Real Hospitality Group, when we have profit and loss calls, it's just not with the typical general manager, director of ops, and maybe asset manager. It's with the revenue manager. It's with the director of sales. Sometimes we'll bring in director of food and beverage. So the more your team knows about data, I think what's been shown is the better flow through to GOP or to NOI, your property's going to receive.
That's great. Anybody have anything to add to that?
I would say
I can add. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say is that similarly to getting more folks involved in knowing not only what the revenue that they capture, what they have the ability to capture, but also understand what adjustments and different things like that do. But one of the things we're also doing is benchmarking across the portfolio. So we can not only judge a specific property against themselves and whether they're growing or shrinking, is it how does that apply across the portfolio? How do we normalize that? Bridget had mentioned getting per seats, getting per, square footage. So they're different hotels and different brands and different locations, but how do we normalize the data and the costs and see, is this a trend that's happening across the portfolio? Are there some practices that a specific hotel, department or thing that isn't doing? And so we take the best in class for our different, data points, and then dig into what's happening at this property, good or bad, and how can we improve that or apply that same thing across the portfolio.
Yeah, great practice there, Angie. Bridget, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to add too that I'm a firm believer in practice in breaking down the data silos. I think in our industry, we often find that every department has their own data analytics, data analysts, tools, reporting, and very often they're not integrated, right? And as a marketer, I like to look at the journey, from the time I put out an ad to the time this person checks in, leaves our hotel, comes back. Like, I need to know all of that. I'm just a nosy person. I need to know. And it's hard. And it's hard to know because it's hard to connect all the different points. And so, with every company I go to, I mean, that's the first thing I work on is breaking down the data silo and really integrating all the data points as much as possible. I know that there's always going to be gaps and we always going to have to make assumptions, but it's important to do that because at the end of the day, and I'm going to use marketing lingo, is about data storytelling. To Joe's point, the data will tell us the story to make better decisions. We need to know, if what we're doing is the right approach, not approach, should we do more of or not? And we make business decisions, big and small, every day. And without this sort of data that could give us a whole 360 view, that kind of decisions cannot be made effectively or strategically. And when it comes to top line or bottom line, is there one way to the other? I think there will always be departments and positions that only look at top line. So for example, I think it would be unfair to say, marketers, we only report your performance on bottom line. Well, because their job is really about driving awareness, driving traffic, and if they don't book or they don't stay or they cancel their stay, it's not really a marketing, fault. It could be for many reasons. So they have done their job. And so I think there will be departments that will be looking at top line only because it drives that initiative, that golden objective, while the C-suites or revenue management, they will probably look at more at the bottom line, operations, the bottom line. And so some of the metrics that are relatively new to me, which I have adopted in the last few years, is return on hire per position. I always like, I'm always asking for people. And so therefore I've gotten the habit of making my case as to why this person or this position needed. And I would put metrics against that and say, I'm just going to make this up, you'll get tenfold back if you pay him or her this. And these are the ways that we're going to make this position successful. And then I would put together like a career plan and say, if we give this person a raise at this year, these are the metrics, and this is how this person will contribute back. That is something it's not a model I've perfected, but it's definitely, I can see a metric that in time, a lot of people will adopt.
That was awesome. That really spoke to me, Bridget, the idea of marketing offering a lot of intangibles as a fellow marketer. Thanks for bringing that up. And the idea of data storytelling, it's so true. It's sort of what I think of, it's taking all that data and turning it into real analysis, right? And identifying those things that you can take action on. When I think of data storytelling, I think of it's people in your shoes and people in Angie's shoes, having to make sense of all that data, identify those key points, and then share them with the key stakeholders across the business, right? So who are those key stakeholders that you guys are most engaged with? Who wants to look at this data, and who's using it to put it into action? I'll follow up with you on that, Bridget. Do you mind speaking to
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. I because I kind of force people to break down the data silos, I also force them to read and look at their data. I think every person, just like Brian said, should know their data because it affects operations. But the reporting, the data storytelling, the metrics should be different. What a CFO look for, the CMO doesn't care, or looks at something different, right? Or the CEO looks for something different than what the salesperson looks at. So in my opinion, I think everybody should be equipped with data, but with metrics and story and reports that's relevant to their position.
Yeah, I totally agree, Angie.
To that. I know it's almost a debate. So, I got a bunch of CMOs in the room. I always challenge CMOs in a couple of ways, right? They look at their data, and the hot button or hot word would be ROAS, right? Return on ad spend,
Yes.
if you will, if you want to focus on that. And it's almost hard to debate that when every ROAS will tell you, every ROAS, you got to be the worst platform in the world if you can't generate ROAS of 9x, 10x, 30x. My average ROAS, for example, on travel ads, whether it's Booking or Booking or Expedia, is 25 plus, every one of them.
Yep.
Now the next guy's gonna say, why don't you spend more? It's clear, right? Forget the the cost of cleaning a room, put that all aside. Let's just simplify it. Why would I spend more if it's 3-to-1 or more? And the way I look at it is, if you don't get to understand the bottom line, then the spend is always justifiable. So what am I saying is the bottom line? Well, the ROAS is already telling you the bottom line is going to be better. So what I look at bottom line is, if you're looking at your bucket of customers around wherever you look at, whether it's whatever market and what kind of market you have, is the notion, is that customer coming to you because of that ad or because of that marketing effort? Or would that customer or somebody else would have came to you regardless? So one way to simplify this is, if you look at your occupancy in any given month, let's say, and if I'm running at 90% plus, do I need to spend the ad that particular month versus January in December for January when I'm running at 60%, right? So not all ad spends are the same, right? You could look at ROAS, but it's effectively fighting where you need to fight. And then if you look at also from a marketing perspective, there's this concept of like upper funnel, lower funnel, right? Am I getting that impact today, or am I getting that impact tomorrow? And then from an owner's perspective versus a brand, I always look at it and say, well, do I need that immediate impact today? So will I spend it on the lower funnels like travel ads, like Meta, versus instant paid marketing and social, right? These are the objectives I think a good CMO will able to dissect, explain to you. And, to us laymen who are not marketers, like, if you will, like CIOs, no CIO should ever say, I know what I'm talking about in marketing. I always start with, I don't know anything, but explain me this. I think that's the way you should look at how you spend your dollars to maximize your returns.
I agree with you. So I'm definitely not going to be one of your CMOs that you debate, because I preach that all the time. I don't like ROAS. I don't think it tells me anything. It's almost like impressions. Great, you give me all these millions of impressions and ROAS, but did you make me $1 at all? So I do believe that when we do measure marketing spend, not all, but more like e-commerce tactical stuff, right? It should be based on cost of sale and acquisition. How much did it cost you to get me this one guest? you know, and it shouldn't be more than OTA. If it is, then your marketing person's not doing so great, right?
That's the easiest way. I think you should challenge it. I agree with that. That's the easiest metrics, because the metrics on the marketing side could be all over the place. One last comment I forgot to mention is the attribution model. When you talk about advertisement and spend like that, ask whoever your agency is, what's the attribution model? If somebody said whoever sells a social media ad 30 days ago, which that's not it. I'm kind of extending it to the absurdity. Even 10 days I consider it somewhat absurd. And they click on or they booked it. They booked a room 10 days or within a 10-day period. Is that a proper attribution model? Because if you use that, yes, you're gonna have high ROAS, of course.
You should be a
I think that's
CMO.
getting, I would say that I think that's getting harder and harder to measure. I don't know what the most current stat is, but the number of touch points it takes to acquire a guest keeps raising. The amount of research that guest does keeps raising. And, you know, I do challenge the agency is, you know, are you counting the same reservation with, you know, several different tactics that I have employed? And how do we narrow in on what is the true cost for acquisition? What did really bring them to me? Was it, you know, we're on travel ads, you know, to get the billboard effect. You know, we want to be there when they're researching, but come book with us. How do we get them to do that? And who really brought me that guest? I think it's getting murkier rather than clearer.
That's a great point, Angie. And just to add, I think overall, you know, talking about data, we're kind of at that intersection where BI is, you know, good and it helps us. But where do we go from there? So looking at AI, you know, and as you said, Angie, in terms of conversion tools, how does AI lower your cost of acquisition, or does it? Or how can you influence AI? I think that's going to be the future, is, you know, really within that, and also machine learning to really, you know, get that cost lowered, and ultimately, you know, talking about profit just flowing right down, you know, to your GOP.
I think you guys are 100% right. The partners that we work with at MDO, a lot of them looking at cost of acquisition in various different ways, a very complicated process that everybody's sort of doing uniquely today. Also something that we're, you know, 100% focused on, exactly what you just mentioned there, Brian, is sort of moving from offering this predictive analysis to more prescriptive analysis, which, you know, we can show you as much data as you want about what you've done in the past, but what does that mean? How do you put it into action, right? So that being said, I think we ended on an awesome note there, guys. I think that was a fantastic conversation. We identified a lot of best practices, a lot of takeaways for our audience. Really, really appreciate you being with us today. Thanks so much. To close, thank you all for joining the International Luxury Hotel Association's webinar series. If you found the webinar to be of value, please do share the recording. Recordings of past webinars can be found on the ILHA's website under events. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate it.